Thank you, Ronnie, for showing me a lamb shank. I should have got the salad, people. I'll do the Homer Simpson and fall asleep on stage. Okay. So let's get into our presentation, eh, Father? Okay, so what are the motivations? What are the motivations, not just generally, not just biblically, which is very important, of course, but also personally. What are my motivations for having this presentation on critical theory? So, encourage conversation dialogue, okay, how to bring understanding and clarity to both sides. Produce an atmosphere of reconciliation. And last but not least, I also have personal reasons as well. There's a saying, do you have skin in the game? I know a lot of you that may go to the pokies sometimes. The saying actually refers to, do you have something to lose? What is your personal investment? Do you have something at risk to lose in this conversation? And for me, I think it's actually a sort of good play on words because I do actually have personal skin in the game. There you see my grandfather here, Eric Joseph George Sr. And you have my grandmother, my beautiful grandmother, Savali. And you have my niece here, Pixie Jr. She's named after the greatest woman in the world, my mother. And there is my very humble nephew. You can see I'm the one that raised him because he's got my attitude, right? A bit too confident for his own good. And so these are the beautiful mixtures of my family. Now that man there passed away. My grandfather passed away in 2008. Came to New Zealand from a working class background, grew up on nothing, immigrated here in the early 1960s, met my grandmother at the factory, asked her out, they got married, had children, had grandchildren. For the next 30 or 40 years, right up till his death, he did tautua. He did service. He brought all my family, my grandma's family over from Samoa. He set them up with jobs. He sorted the immigration papers out. 30, 40 years. And then for someone with a PhD in gender studies to turn around and tell me, well, actually, your granddad was racist. You may not know this, Eric. He may not have known this, but your granddad was racist. Wait, hang on. Am I on crazy pills here? Why would a racist man marry a beautiful Polynesian woman and commit himself to serving her family in tautua, in service, mai tautua? Doesn't make sense, people. This does not make sense. Action speaks louder than words. And of course, I remember talking to a critical theorist. We'll get into what that is, but a critical theorist believes in critical theory. And then he tells me, he's a master's student in sociology at Victoria University. And he says to me, what you really don't know is that your granddad may have been feeling some white guilt. That's why he married your grandma out of pity, and he helped to bring her family over. And I said, white guilt? Sorry, do you really believe? I looked at him, do you really believe this, brother? I'll tell you why he did it, because he loved her. Very simple. And this is why I want to come back and balance, because in the indigenous worldview, we're always about balance. That's why you have the idea of tapu and noa, sacred and secular. The great Samoan scholar Malama Milesea, he goes on about the different categories of chiefs. Aligi and Tula Fale. The Aligi is sacred, the Tula Fale is secular. The Tula Fale is the mouthpiece of the sitting chief. Standing chief, sitting chief. What's the point? Balance. So I'm seeing a very heavy imbalance here. Yes, as indigenous people, we would want our fellow European and other non-indigenous Christian brothers and sisters to understand us. But in the same way, don't think it's all right to disrespect the mana, to disrespect the tautua of my ancestor. There's this saying, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And also, when we're talking about my little cute niece and my nephew, seriously, are they racist? They're white. In fact, that David right there, he speaks better Samoan than me. Right? He's been raised by my grandmother, full Nana Samoa. And for someone, and when he grows up, I would hate for someone to say to him, oh, you're racist. He looks back, what are you talking about? I'm raised in Southern culture. So you see, this is the problem. This is the problem when you only go skin deep. You miss important nuances. Okay. Now let's go on. So the last slide was my father's side. This is my mother's side. Here is my grandfather, my mother's father, Linga Te Kaiwaka Rezero. And he also married a beautiful Samoan lady. You know, he was a hard-working man. He was a wolfie. So he grew up in Wailoa, land of the two-way people. And he caught the train. Well, I doubt he paid a ticket, but that's a different story. he caught the train, he got a ticket, went all the way to Auckland, had nothing, and booked his way up. Okay? 30, 40 years of service, helping his family. I imagine myself going back in time and taking my buddy there, the critical theorist, with me, and say, well, actually, brother, you're oppressed. You know, this guy, he's a loving heart, he's a very hard man. He'd probably say, oppressed? What are you talking about? Victim, what are you talking about? By God's grace and my hard work, I came out of poverty. No, you're oppressed, you're a victim. Please, you're disrespecting the mana of our ancestors. So we're going to go for outline. So we want to define what critical theory is, and a summary of the lineage. So when we talk about lineage, we talk about whakapapa. We usually talk about people, but we can also talk about the whakapapa of ideas, the lineage of ideas. And then we're going to go into part 2, which is critical theory and biblical truth. So what are the comparisons? What is the biblical understanding of power? What is the critical theorist understanding of power? What is the biblical perspective on race? And what is the critical theory understanding, critical theorist understanding of race? We'll also have some practical examples as well, because I realized there was a lot of overlap with my bro Brendan and my brother Sean's presentations as well. So final last minute I redid it and I put some more practical examples that I have personally experienced, and I know a lot of you would have experienced these opinions in your discussions with people. So critical theory actually is taught within sociology. So remember social work from high school, or is the sociology and social sciences. So the study, sociology is the study of relationships, that means the dynamics between people and institutions. So what I mean by institutions, we mean a sociologist's job in the university. Sociologist's job is to understand what is the relationship between you, society, and religion. What is the relationship between you, society, and government? And so we see that within sociology, you have the lineage. This is the whakapapa of critical theory. This goes right back to the 1800s of German philosophy, comes down to where we are here today. Okay? Now, I did have all this spread out across a few slides, but I thought to myself, hang on, I'm going to do like my cousins on the East Coast, Ngāti Puro, and you know, in Ngāti Puro, when you usually ask people until they're Māori, how are you? Kei te pēhā koe. Actually, on Ngāti Puro, they say, kei te aha. Now that actually means, what are you doing? But because the understanding of Ngāti Puro as a tribe in the East Coast, they're very direct. They get straight to the chase. They say, how are you? Very flowery. They say, kei te aha. What are you doing, bro? And so let's just, I'll put that there. I'll explain a little bit about the whakapapa, the coming down of critical theory. Now, what's interesting here is it all comes from what they call continental philosophy, or philosophy that came from the continent, specifically German philosophy. So you've got Hegel there, you've got George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, you've got Karl Marx. I know a lot of you may know a little bit about Karl Marx. Just a quick pause on there. Isn't it ironic? And I don't mean to offend anyone, but isn't it ironic that many people who buy into critical theory, who class a whole group of people, aka white people, as all racist, got their ideas from dead white guys? I mean, is it ironic or what? You see, there's implicit contradictions here. But we need a a very delicate mental hand to make distinctions. Okay. Then it comes down into conflict theory. So remember conflict theory in the last slide? Conflict theory is basically a worldview, a framework, which puts any category, any group of person into two categories. Oppressed, oppressor. The haves, the have-nots. Okay? Group identity. Then it's coming down here to the Frankfurt School. So again, another perspective from German philosophy. A group of German sociologists who developed critical theory. So we see that one of the people, or the ancestors of critical theory, find its beginnings in German philosophy, comes down that German philosophy, the ideas of Hegel and Marx become known as conflict theory. That's the framework which always sees history. Conflict theory sees history progressing forward, moving forward, only in conflict. Imagine that if you described your whole life. What was your whole life? Conflict. When I look back on my life, all conflict. I mean, what a really depressing worldview. Everything. So don't just think this like little micro thing. That's everything. Everything must be understood. And life is a struggle. Life is a war between two groups, two classes, the haves and the have-nots. This goes down and becomes known as critical theory. So what's critical theory? Seeks out, applies, critiques. So when I mean critical, don't criticize. I mean critical is to critique, to evaluate. That's where the understanding of the word critical comes from. Critical theory. And it desires to change social structures based upon these critiques. Then if you get critical theories, you've got conflict theory, critical theory. If you get critical theory and apply it to education, it takes on a new name. It's called critical pedagogy. Pedagogy is just a fancy word for methodologies or systems of thought in education. Then if you apply that to race, we'll get into it a bit later, you apply critical theory to race, it's called critical race theory. Okay? So you can see it's not a simple matter, but this is just a summary of the lineage. Where did it come from? When you try to understand an idea, you must understand in what environment was it born in. Because if you don't understand the historic context of a belief system, you will not understand the present context of a belief system. So now we've got this definition, this description of critical theory. Now we're going to analyze this very carefully. Critical theory is a social theory oriented towards critiquing and changing society as a whole. Okay, not too bad. It differs from traditional theory, which focuses only on understanding or explaining. Not too bad. Critical theories aim to dig beneath the surface of social life and uncover the assumptions that keep human beings from a full and true understanding of how the world works. And now, hang on. It was all good until we reached the last sentence. What's the problem? Critical theories aim to dig beneath the surface of social life and uncover the assumptions. Well, hang on. If you're trying to uncover assumptions, ideas, beliefs, dynamics in society, you've got to get yourself in check first. Because you yourself might be making an assumption about the assumptions. And there's old Granddaddy Karl Marx. There's this famous quote. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. These aren't your typical philosophers sipping coffee and just purely intellectualizing with each other. There's an agenda. They want to physically, materialistically, tangibly change your reality. You might be saying, oh, well, that's good. You've got good intentions. Not your intentions. What's the consequence of your intentions? I don't live on intentions. Right, if you're one of my cousins from Muriwea and the Waimana, the Tuahoi land, you're riding a horse, and you're taking some sekahangi to your neighbor's house, okay, riding, run over someone, hit them with the horse. Bro, you just broke my leg. Sorry, bro, it wasn't my intention. You see, intention doesn't really mean much. It's the consequences, what you live with from the intentions. So that's Karl Marx for you. Understanding power. How does critical theory understand power? This is very important. So when we think of power, we think of physical strength. We might think of wealth. We might think of influence, authority, control. That's fine. Those are all valid classifications of power. What's critical theory's understanding of power? Critical theory's understanding of power, they call it hegemonic power. What does that mean? That means the group, the class, the people that are dominant in your society. And again, it comes back to who? The oppressors in power and the oppressed, the powerless, the have-nots. What's the biblical understanding of power? Let's go to the Bible. So yes, because of God's just nature, He doesn't look down and say, oh, I'm happy those people are getting oppressed. No, He's a God of justice. He's a God of love, of mercy. Proverbs chapter 28, verse 15. Like a roaring lion or a charging bear is a wicked ruler over our helpless people. So God is concerned about what happens in our lives. He's concerned about oppression. He's concerned about power. But here's the problem. You better make sure that what you say is oppression is truly oppression. Because if you have in your mind, and we'll get this in the practical examples later, a common thing is, they're all racist at that church, bro. Why is that? Because I walked in, and not only are they all white, it didn't make me feel welcome. Oh, hang on, bro. What do you want? A red carpet and paparazzi? No, seriously. That's just your subjective feeling. You want to be very careful. That's not an instance of oppression. And in fact, it's very offensive to people who actually lived under institutional oppression. South Africa, the apartheid, the Jim Crow laws. You're actually making a mockery of those who actually did suffer. Now here we have Psalm 22 verse 28. For dominion belongs to the Lord, He rules all nations. Okay? Now, I can hear my little friend from university, my critical theorist friend, and he's saying to me, so if God's in power, He's got the hegemonic power. He's the bad guy, Eric. Well, hang on, brother. You're misunderstanding something. Power in and of itself is not the problem. It's the abuse of power. Power is a good thing. If you use your power, if you use your mana, if you use your mamaru for the positive contributions and influence on others' lives. Power in and of itself is not a bad thing. Now let's go to the understanding of race. Okay? Now, the more I began to research this and dig into it, I understood that there's a strong connection between how critical theory as an ideology understands the dynamics of race, because it's tied to the understanding of power. Right? So why is every white person in this country racist according to this silly ideology, toxic ideology, poisonous ideology? Because apparently you guys are the ones in power. And so the race that is the dominant group in society, you are racist by default. No matter if you're not actually racist. I mean, can you imagine that? Hey bro, you're racist. Oh, hold up. What do you mean? I love all people. Now you're racist, but the catch is you just don't know it. People, what is this? When you really apply a logical lens, a lot of this is actually emotional nonsense. But the reason why we're here today, the reason why we must defend and interact with these ideologies is because if we don't, no one will. Okay, how do we understand race? Now, I know there's probably people in the crowd, technically there's no such thing as race. I get that. Understood. We're all the same biologically. Homo sapiens, that's fine. But it's important that when we use these terms race, even if it's just a term or misnomer that we use for practical purposes, the understanding of race of human beings in the Bible is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. that God who loves us created us in his image. Now in Acts chapter 17, when the Apostle Paul stands on Mars Hill, what does he say? From one man he made all nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out the appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. Every human being, in their essence, is equal. No matter what skin color you have, you are equal to God, because God loves you and he made you in his image. So this is very important. God looks at the heart of a person. And excuse the joke, I do this to humor. But why I do thank God is, imagine if our salvation was on our fitness level. I'm going down. I ain't going to make the cut. What's the beautiful thing about God? The beautiful thing about the biblical perspective. God looks at the heart of a person. We see there from the scriptures in 1 Samuel chapter 16. And let me sort of play that on sort of street talk. So here comes Samuel. Okay, Jesse, where's your sons, bro? God talked to me and we're going to ordain someone to be king. All right, boys, get up. Yeah, they all are. Sorry, I'm imitating my really cocky Southern uncles back in South. They were very confident. And then so they line up. And he said, is this the one, Lord? No. Oh, bro, he's good looking. This the one, Lord? No. He's got a really nice hair. This the one, Lord? No. Do you see? Really awkward. But none of these sons are going to be the king of Israel. Have you got another son? Yeah. We've got the youngest. In the Māori they call Potiki. It's the baby. We've got the youngest, David. He's only like 14, 15 years old. He's just minding the sheep. Why want him? Here's David coming. God says to Samuel, that's the one. Why? The Bible says David was a man after God's own heart. Your heart is the issue. That is the seat of where sin can exist, where racism can exist, where pride can exist, where malice can exist, is your heart. Not your skin color. So I just wrote this. I know people want to be out there, bro, what are you doing? I just wrote this on top of my head. It's like a little play. So once upon a time, in the magical land of critical theory, all the people who developed critical theory, they had a meeting, right? And here's person one, here's the chairman. Okay, guys, how do we best approach reconciliation? Here's person two. I've got an idea. We understand each other through reason? No, get out. Here's person three. How about forgiving one another so that we can move on in unity? Heck no, get out. Here's the fourth person. How about calling an entire group of people racist because of their skin color? You got the job. You got the job. How ridiculous is this? Okay, now here's some practical examples from discussions. Now we already covered the first one. Let's encounter or interact with the second one. Now, it's going to get interesting, people. I told you I not like controversy, but you know what Dr. Walter Martin said, the great counter-cultologist. He said, controversy for the sake of controversy is sin. Controversy for the sake of truth is according to the word of God. Let's go. So they said, when people say, bro, your wife makes some racist there, sorry. What? Why? I mean, he just saved my life at a bar fight the other night. He comes and brings food to us. He loves us. He never says a racist thing around me. Why is he racist? Bro, because he couldn't pronounce Kawero properly. Well, no, hang on. Hang on, my critical theorist friend from Victoria University. So I'm not trying to dig at University of Victoria. I'm not trying to say that. But this dude really did come. And I'm using him as an imaginary voice, okay? He said, because that shows that they're not willing to take the time to pronounce Māori place names. And that's disrespecting the mana of it. Hang on. We've got to make a very clear clarification here, buddy. My grandmother's second language is English. She didn't even pass high school. Now, for any of you out there who understand the difference between the Ngana Samoa language and Te Reo Māori, the Ngana Samoa language does not have a heavy R. It does not have the R sound, right? So when my grandma, who's full Samoan, who's an indigenous person, says, why are you still doing in Kaurau? Come back up to Auckland. You've got no taro in Kaurau. And so she tries to coach me back. Come on, do some taro and pig's head. Now, by her saying Kaurau, does it make her racist? That's the problem. If you look for oppression where there isn't really any, if you don't find it, what are you going to do? You're going to fabricate the oppression. You're going to fabricate the problems. Now, do you get people that are like, don't really care about the Māori name for it. Who cares about the Māori language, the dead language anyway? Now, that's obviously clearly racist. So I'm not here to say there isn't people that do that, but please, treat it on a case-by-case basis. Some people can't pronounce Māori words, no matter how hard they try. That's not racism. I mean, it's like me saying, well, I'm from Beijing, China. Mandarin, the Chinese language of China, is tonal, it has 4 different tones. If you can't pronounce the longest Mandarin word in perfect Chinese, you're racist against China. Doesn't make sense. How about this one? Their ancestors did horrible things, so that means they're racist. Now, if we apply that to any culture in the world, we're all racist. If we apply that sentence, that statement, which is very common, we're all suddenly racist. Okay? Now let me use an example. So we know that different cultures develop at different times. And their morality, their understanding of moral practices, right and wrong, their moral consciousness change as well. So let's suppose that you live in your house, right? And any time it goes to 12 o'clock at lunchtime, you smack your kid on the hand, no matter what reason. Okay? Now that's pretty bad. It's pretty horrible. But then your neighbor, instead of smacking their child's hand at 12 o'clock on the hand, they take a limb off. Right? Now you're like, okay, Eric, hang on, you're getting really morbid here. The point is this. There's obviously a huge difference between getting smacked on the hand and getting a finger taken off. There's a moral difference between experiencing suffering, experiencing violence. Okay? So, under this principle, so let's see, how did they used to do it back in the day? So if I'm quarter English, so the quarter English to me is racist because my forefathers on that side did some colonizing and imperialism. And then I'm 3/4 Māori and Samoa. So my Māori side is bad too because we engaged in kaitangata, cannibalism. You see how ridiculous this gets? You can keep unpackaging it. The more I sit there and unpackage something, this is really nonsense. This is real poisonous nonsense. It doesn't even make sense. So their answers are horrible things, so that means they're racist. Now here's a beautiful quote from Neil Shenvi. Google him, people, he's really awesome. He's dug a lot into this. He says, call out, fight against racism. Okay, that's fine. How can we get to a better conversation? Acknowledge and fight racism. We need to acknowledge and fight racism. Let me speak very plainly. People are embracing these ideas in large part because they are rightly concerned about the wickedness of racism. Let's pause there. On our side of the fence, shall I say, don't automatically assume that if you hear the terms critical theory, oppression, that person automatically thinks all white people are racist, okay? Again, it needs a delicate mental hand. What I mean by that, you need to evaluate and interact with people's vars upon a base-by-base situation, base-by-base circumstance. So listen carefully. If you are concerned, therefore, Neil Shenvi says, about how dangerous these ideas are, if you're worried, like I am, about how they may impact the church, then the worst thing you can possibly do is to ignore or minimize racism or sexism or any form of injustice. That's fine. We get that. But again, are these really legitimate circumstances of racism? If you cannot pronounce the word kawero, Oh my gosh, you're not racist. Now here we go. When we talk about reconciliation, when you remember the whakapapa from critical conflict theory, down to critical theory, down to critical race theory, down to critical pedagogy, what do I remember? It actually has influenced theology as well. That's why you have such a thing as black liberation theology. Here's one of the founding fathers of black liberation theology, James Cone. What does he say in his book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree? In the lynching era, between 1880 and 1940, white Christians lynched nearly 5,000 black men and women in a manner which obviously echoes of the Roman crucifixion of Jesus. Yet these Christians did not see the irony or contradiction in the actions. Okay, that's fine. Reasonable, understand where he's coming from. Notice what he says up here. Any talk about God that fails to make God's liberation of the oppressed, its starting point is not Christian. Well, now hang on. Let's get something straight. Yes, we should engage in anti-oppression acts. Yes, we should stand up for our fellow man if we really do see instances. Don't keep silent. But the true oppressor here is your sin. It's the heart of everyone. See, that's the problem. When you look at people, when you attack people, the scripture said you're fighting the wrong man. What is behind the person? What I mean by that is, what is their beliefs? What has shaped their thinking? It's not a physical battle, okay? It's a spiritual battle. The heart of a person. Okay, get the comparison. Yeah, lynching tree, the cross, okay. Now, another thing is, you'll realize something too. Anyone notice that he put in the last sentence these Christians, right? Christians. Okay, because obviously, if you're going around lynching people, you're not a Christian. I mean, you can call yourself whatever you want to. But if your actions, the way you live in your life, in your speech and your actions, is not according to the word of God. Because Christian is a follower of Christ. What's Jesus Christ? What's Jesus Christ? The baby Jesus Christ of history? The black Afrocentric Jesus Christ? The Aryan Jesus Christ with blonde hair and blue eyes? Or the Jesus Christ who's the Son of the living God? Now, for all that talk, he's missing something. He forgot the end. For all that talk, I love, oh yes, thank you, Doctor, thank you, Professor James Cone. I love the analogy. Sort of makes sense. Powerful, relevant. Saying that Jesus got lynched. Putting the lynching tree next to the cross. But there's something missing from your writings. There's something very important missing from your perspective. It's forgiveness. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. If you do not have forgiveness, you cannot actually move forward. You will always be chained to the past hurts, chained to the past. I mean, seriously, how are we really going to move forward? We talk about biculturalism. Tangata whenua, the crown, tangata whenua, Pākehā. We talk about multiculturalism. If you can't forgive, there will be no reconciliation. Now, I know you guys are sitting out there, I sort of expected something a bit more profound there, buddy. The basic foundation, forgive, because Jesus forgave us. Let me take this back to my life. Growing up in West Auckland, then in Kawerau, me and my family, we went down to Kawerau when I was about 10 years old for my dad's job. And here's my little takeaway loving persona. We went from Wendy's and BK to 4 squares of Big Bean pies. 8,000 people in Kawerau, or 1.5 million people in Auckland. And so it's a bit of an adjustment. One thing I realized though, Suffering is everywhere. There's different modes of suffering. Emotional suffering, physical suffering. You know, I once had someone say to me, Eric, you got a beautiful narrative. This is the language they use, right, people? You got a beautiful narrative. I feel like because you're oppressed, and because you got a beautiful narrative, and because you grew up in my culture, you could really use it. Well, hang on. The thing that oppressing me is my pride. The thing that is oppressing me is of a spiritual nature. The thing that is oppressing humanity is sin. When you view physical, all in the physical, you're missing the bigger picture. You're fighting the wrong enemy. And so when I think about growing up, and my grandmother, my mum's mother, she prayed for 13 years. These are the two factors that rescued my family out from the fire. From the fire of drugs, from the fire of gangs. My grandmother prayed consistently for over 13 years. That was the first part. Prayers. Being a living witness. What was the second part? The second part was every week, without fail, the local Catholic Church dropped off food because we were too poor. You see, this is the understanding. Your words are good. Put your actions behind your words. Then we realize, okay, this Christianity, these people, they must follow a different Jesus, not the Jesus of history, the Jesus of no power, not the Afrocentric Jesus who hates all white people, not the Aryan Jesus who looks like he was born in Berlin, Germany, but the Jesus that is sitting at the right hand of the Father, the Jesus who loves me, and we know he loves us because these people are not judging us, they're bringing food consistently. You're not doing like, oh, here's your food, you useless pack of people. Oh, forgive me for those fellow someone in the crowd. Some people we love to give gifts, we like to make a big thing about it. But yeah, gift, only $10,000, not much. We do that sort of like reverse psychology ones. Only $5,000. Wait for the big applause. So they couldn't do that either. They just said, excuse me, Mrs. Rizzido, to my grandmother, here's your food. God bless you. You see, this Jesus in heaven needs our hands to do his work. We are the hands, the eyes, the mouthpiece of God in the terms of reconciliation, in terms of helping the poor. Like I said in the last slide, people always talk about statistics. I am a statistic. We come from statistics. We come from nothing. But by God's grace, my grandmother's prayers, and the love of other Christians, he plucked us from the fire. The true enemy is sin. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So reconciliation is actually a three-way dynamic. And we often think of reconciliation, we think, I got to clear the var. I got to make right the var. The space between me and my brother. We had an argument. Okay? That's fine. That's the lower house of reconciliation. What am I talking about? There's two rooms, there's two houses, the lower house and the higher house. The higher house is for reconciliation to truly be powerful, enduring, and permanent. God and the love of Jesus must be in the picture. God and the love of Jesus must be in the picture. Well, hang on, Eric. There were some case studies. I lived this, brother. That's my case study. You don't believe me? Ask my cousins. You don't believe me? Ask my mom. You don't believe me? Ask the people that we grew up with. That's my case study. I know the grace of God because reconciliation between us and other groups, we have lived it. You need the higher form. Lower form is good. Don't get me wrong, I don't want you guys leaving the presentation. Bro, this dude said that reconciliation is not a good thing. I don't want my statement on stuff.co.nz for that. It's the lower form though. Why? You need the internal changing of your nature. That is, God's Holy Spirit comes in you and changes you. Changes how you talk, changes how you walk, changes how you treat others. That is why reconciliation, as St. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 18 to 21. All this is from who? God. Sorry, Karl Marx, you're a clever dude. Ain't taking my living advice from you. Sorry, Hegel, I really like your dialectic. Ain't taking my advice from you. God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. Why? Now, I know some people will be like, well, hang on, how does that work out practically here? I'll tell you. Happens to me every day if I hear a comment that I believe is offensive. Or if I run into someone and they might be like, I think you're done, man, you're nothing. What's my reaction? Bro, really? What's the flesh say? Well, we can go right now. Let's go. But for the sacrifice of Jesus, because he forgave me, he showed me mercy, I showed mercy to him. That is a practical example of what reconciliation is. Reconciling your heart, your wairua, your spirit. So that Jesus' example can be your compass, can be your star to navigate the everyday lives, the everyday situation in our lives, of our journey. Jesus. Now, if we go ahead, that is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them. Remember what I just said in the other slide about the past? Bro, you're racist. Like, even though that you're actually married to like a Maori lady and that you actually help them out every Sunday, you're actually racist even though you've got mixed kids. You're actually racist even though you went out of your way to do tikanga to the Maori. Yeah, because your great-great-great-grandfather, he stole like an acre of land from mine. Hey, brother. Forgive and move on. Forgive and move on. The heart is the key. So if you're saying, well, why do I need to forgive? Brother, you're missing it. If Jesus forgave us, if Jesus forgave his enemies, who do you think you are to not forgive other people? And that's only half the picture. The other side is this. Why are you calling them racist when it happened 200 years ago anyway? So make sure when you forgive someone, make sure it's not you that needs forgiveness first. Make sure you search inwardly first before you look outside. Take the plank out of your own eye before you... Take the speck out of your eye, the plank out of your own eye before you reach for the speck in your neighbor's eye. It's almost like being offended is like... it's the right thing to do. Like, being offended is like a virtue. Oh, that's offensive. That's offensive. I don't like the colour blue. Because blues in the Union Jack and the Union Jacks in Great Britain and Great Britain colonized the world. Relax. Stop it. Make sure that your offense, right, is not a problem you have first. The ministry of reconciliation must include God. The dynamics, we always think of me and the other person, us and these other groups. If it doesn't include God, it's only the lower house. It's only the lower form. The higher form is spiritual regeneration, looking to Jesus. In closing, you'll be like, well, how do you know that? Again, I wouldn't be here without living this. And it's not all about me and my family, countless of other people as well. And so, we need to understand reconciliation and including the biblical perspective as well.